Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas here on France 24. Coming up in this week's show. After attacks on 2 Saudi Arabian oil facilities wipe out 5% of the global supply, US President Donald Trump insists the US no longer needs to rely on oil from the Middle East. Just how accurate is that claim? More than 2 weeks after Hurricane Dorian devastated swathes of the Bahamas, many of those made homeless are now grappling with US immigration rules as they fight to win the right to stay with family members in the States. And the favelas of Rio de Janeiro are up in arms after the city's mayor instructed snipers to target people carrying guns. It's his most controversial measure yet in the fight against organised crime. We begin with our number of the week, 20. Global oil prices shot up by 20% on Monday after a weekend attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities suspended the production of 5.7 million barrels a day. In response, President Donald Trump promptly authorised the use of the US's emergency oil reserves, while at the same time announcing that the US had become such a big oil producer itself that it no longer needed to import fuel from the Middle East.
The stock market's up again, and we're very close.
Confident or cocky. Either way, the president isn't fazed by recent drone attacks in Saudi Arabia. US energy is doing well, meaning the world power has somewhat of a buffer during oil price shocks. That's all thanks to reserves such as here in Midland in Texas. The traditional land of black gold, its best years were thought to be behind it by the end of the 20th century, surpassed by plentiful crude in the Middle East. But its fortunes turned 10 years ago with the discovery of shale oil and gas, triggering the nation's energy renaissance. But extracting it requires controversial use of fracking. Sand and water is pumped at high pressure deep underground to force oil and gas embedded in the rock to the surface.
When I came to work here 33 years ago, to drill this well was about 55 days, okay? We're on a day 11. So we drill the wells faster, we drill the wells straighter, and we drill the wells safer.
Thanks to shale, the United States became the world's top energy producer in 2018, ahead of Saudi Arabia and Russia. Imports are down and exports are up. Energy independence is in sight. But shale needs pipelines to transport it, meaning that it won't be able to meet all of America's energy needs straight away.
When Hurricane Dorian struck the northern Bahamas in early September, some 70,000 people were left homeless. Many have been evacuated to the capital, Nassau, which is struggling to provide enough food and shelter for the new arrivals. Others are attempting to join their families in the United States. But as Julia Kim explains, US authorities aren't making it easy for them.
Please, all passengers that don't have US visa, please proceed to disembark.
The announcement was a slap in the face for these Bahamians on a ferry bound for Fort Lauderdale in Florida. In the end, they disembarked at Freeport on Grand Bahama Island, which had been flooded by the Category 5 storm.
At the last minute like this, it's kind of disappointing. It's hurtful because watching my daughters cry.
These survivors of Hurricane Dorian have no visa, nor a copy of their criminal record, the 2 documents required by US border control. Most of them lost everything but the clothes on their back when Dorian swept through the island.
If those folks did stay on the boat and arrived, we would have processed them, vetted them, and worked within our laws and protocols and done what we had to do to facilitate them.
Meanwhile, others have sought refuge in the capital, Nassau, which was largely spared from Dorian. 70,000 out of a population of 400,000 are displaced, according to recent estimates. The Prime Minister, Hubert Minnis, announced the country is incapable of helping everyone. One stopgap solution is temporary housing, constructed on the worst-hit islands, Grand Bahama and Abaco. During a weekend visit, the UN Secretary-General reminded wealthy nations that the world's main polluters had an obligation to mitigate the impact of climate change.
There is in the international community the idea that middle-income countries should not be supported. It's a wrong idea, especially that middle-income countries have high levels of vulnerability to external shocks they are not responsible for.
Despite the urgency of the situation, the US president has refused to ease his hardline border policy for displaced Bahamians, citing national security reasons.
The Bahamas had some tremendous problems with people going to the Bahamas that weren't supposed to be there. I don't want to allow people that weren't supposed to be in the Bahamas to come into the United States, including some very bad people and some very bad gang members and some very, very bad drug dealers.
His comments were widely slammed by prominent American celebrities, including the Bahamian-born NBA player Klay Thompson and basketball icon Michael Jordan, who has donated $1 million to help the victims of Hurricane Dorian.
Before being elected as the governor of Rio de Janeiro, Witzel spoke of his plans to use snipers to fight drug traffickers in the capital's favelas. Few believed he'd actually implement the policy, but he did. And now tensions between authorities and residents are on the rise once again. Valeria, Saccone and Louise Raulais have the story.
Here is the new governor of the state of Rio de Janeiro, at the helm of a police operation against drug traffickers.
The operation begins today. The chaos is over. We will put this house in order.
Witzel won his election by promising a fierce fight against organized crime. He then proposed using snipers to shoot down criminal offenders carrying rifles.
O recado está dado.
The message is clear. Do not fight the police. If you do, there are only two possibilities: prison or death.
The local opposition has written to the UN to denounce what it describes as genocidal policies, but it hasn't shaken Witzel. On Ipanema Beach, hundreds of people denounce police aggression against young, black, and poor residents of Rio's favelas.
My name is Bruna. I am the voice of Marcus Vinicius, the 14-year-old who was shot in the back by armed state officials.
Bruna's son was killed a little over a year ago during a police operation in the Maré favela. He was shot in the back while on his way to school, wearing a school uniform. 14 months later, the investigation of the death is still unfinished. This year, Bruna's daughter found herself under fire from another police operation in which snipers fired down from helicopters. The little girl took refuge in a medical center.
It's cowardly to use snipers because the police already know how to shoot. I will not stay quiet. The state killed my son, and I won't allow them to bring me back my daughter's body, the only child I have left, her t-shirt blood-stained like they did with her brother.
Bruna counts on the support of Renata Souza, a leftist state congresswoman born in the same favela. In May, Souza petitioned to the UN and the Organization of American States to try to end this policy. As retaliation, the governor's party started a process to revoke her mandate.
We need the state of Rio and the federal government to take responsibility and create mechanisms to reduce the number of homicides, not increase it by shooting at us from helicopters.
The governor says that during the first 6 months of 2019, the number of violent deaths in Rio de Janeiro dropped 23% from the same period the year before. But there's also been a record increase in the number of people killed by police, at least 881, 15% more than in 2018.
We head now to the American Southwest, where every summer the intertribal Indian ceremonial takes place over the course of 3 days in New Mexico. A riot of feasting, dancing and singing, the event sees tribes from across the region come together to perform ancient rites and share ancestral traditions. Brian Quinn and our colleagues from France Télévisions have this report.
The circle forms at twilight. One after another, Native Americans enter the powwow. The ceremony begins with a traditional dance to honor their warriors. the rhythm of the drum symbolizing the beating hearts of the earth and of the native people. This is the intertribal Indian ceremonial of Gallup, New Mexico. The elders of the Hopi tribe guide the steps of their people, adorned in eagle feathers.
To us, eagle is the most sacred bird among the Native Americans. It is more sacred than the American flag is to us.
Navajo, Apache, Kiowa, all together. In the colors and designs of their clothing, nothing is without meaning.
My colors were given to me. My yellow beadwork represents the corn, the road, the plants of life. Green lines that represents all the roads on Mother Earth.
Set amidst the wild landscapes of the American West, earth and nature accompany the three-day festival. Balance is a key theme here. It's also critical to the voladores, or flying men, ceremony from Mexico. 4 performers attach their ankles to a rope anchored at the top of a 30-meter mast. Then they spin into the void. The ritual, accompanied by drum and flute, is intended to appease the gods so that they will bring rain. Most of these Native Americans live on reservations between New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, but many others have come from far and wide to share their sacred songs and dances during this unique American festival.
Now, it's certainly not the safest or cheapest midnight snack you can think of. One woman in California recently found herself in hospital after swallowing her engagement ring. Bride-to-be Jenna Evans woke up one morning to see her ring finger bare. Recalling a vivid nightmare in which she had to swallow her ring to protect it from bad guys on a speeding train, she put 2 and 2 together, and an X-ray later confirmed her assumption. You'll be pleased to hear the ring is now out of her stomach and back on her finger where it belongs. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Inside the Americas. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next week.
Keep up to date on the latest from the Middle East. We bring you political, economic, and cultural events from the region in this weekly Middle Eastern program.
Middle East Matters, presented by Sanam Chantier on France 24 and France24.com.